The thing about hearing your own parents call you a burden is that some part of you already knew. That's the part that makes you feel physically sick. I wasn't even supposed to be on the phone with them. My father's coat pocket pressed a sequence of buttons at a restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona, and my number came up. I was standing at my kitchen sink scrubbing a dish when I heard my mother's laugh cut through the loud noise of a busy dinner. I almost said, "Dad, you pocket dialed me." I almost laughed. Instead, I turned off the faucet and I listened. My name is Annabelle Croft. I'm 24 years old, and up until recently, I owned a beautiful 4-bedroom craftsman-style home in Clover Ridge, Virginia. My grandmother left it deliberately to me alone because she was the only person in my family who actually loved me. She bought it decades ago, repainted it herself, and cared for the massive oak tree in the backyard. When she died, she left it to me fully paid. My parents moved in with me a year ago. My father, Gerald Croft, lost all his savings in a bad real estate deal in Arizona, and my mother called me crying, claiming they were looking at trailers. I said yes. I always said yes. They were supposed to stay for 2 months. It turned into a year of absolute disrespect. They took over the master bedroom. I cooked every meal. I drove my father to his appointments. I paid for their groceries, their streaming services, everything. In return, my mother rearranged my kitchen and told me my taste was cheap. My father put his giant leather recliner directly in front of the window, killing my grandmother's favorite orchids. He told me I was overreacting over weeds. The Tuesday it happened, I called my father to ask about some missing paperwork. He didn't answer, but his phone connected in his pocket. That's when I heard my mother's voice through the speaker. "She won't fight it," my mother said, sounding incredibly smug. "You know how she is. She feels guilty about everything. Just mention your back pain and the medical bills, and she'll sign the deed transfer right over to us." I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then my father's voice came through, loud and confident. "By next month, this house will be in our names. She's always asking how she can help, so we'll just let her help us permanently." There was a pause, the sound of a wine glass clinking, and then my mother laughed. She won't even realize what she signed until she's out on the street. And then my father said it. Not with anger, but like he was stating a simple fact. "She's always been an absolute burden to this family." To both of us, my mother agreed. And now this house is finally going to make up for it. The call cut out. I set my phone face down on the counter. I looked at the empty windowsill where my grandmother's orchids used to be, and my blood turned to pure ice. They weren't guests. They were parasites waiting to strip me of the only thing I had left. They were leaving for Italy in 2 days. A luxury vacation that I fully funded. They had asked for $4,000 for flights and spending money because their travel card had an issue. They promised to pay me back. They never had any intention of paying me back. They thought they had 10 days to enjoy Rome before coming back to steal my home. 10 days was more than I needed to completely destroy their lives. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I called a property attorney named Vivian Park. "Vivian," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "I need to sell my house fast. Cash buyer, off-market, no public listings." Vivian didn't even hesitate. "I have a developer who has been looking in Clover Ridge for months. He has proof of funds. If you're serious, I can have the paperwork drafted by 5 p.m. "Do it," I said. The house was mine alone. My grandmother had ensured my name was the only one on the deed. 2 days later, while my parents were boarding their flight to Rome, I sat in a downtown office and signed the closing documents. The contract included a strict, non-negotiable clause. The buyer had to preserve my grandmother's oak tree. He agreed. The final wire transfer hit my account, $870,000. Every single dollar was moved into a private bank account, my parents didn't even know existed. I drove them to the airport myself that afternoon. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. My mother hugged me, wearing a designer silk scarf I bought her, smelling like expensive perfume. "Don't forget to water my indoor plants, Annabelle," she whispered into my ear. "I'll take care of everything, Mom," I said, looking her dead in the eye. The moment their plane left the tarmac, my moving crew arrived at the house. I had a giant legal pad with 3 columns: mine, theirs, and trash. Everything my grandmother left me went into a secure storage unit in Richmond. Everything my parents owned. My father's leather recliner, my mother's expensive clothes, their documents, their medications, was loaded into a separate moving truck. I paid for a cheap storage unit 10 minutes down the highway and had the movers dump everything there. By morning, the Craftsman house was completely hollow. Every room echoed. I walked to the garage window and taped a single sheet of paper to the glass facing the driveway. Printed in huge bold letters, it said, "A burden did this." Then I changed the locks, handed the keys to the new owner's representative, and drove away. I was 200 miles away when my phone started exploding. It was 4:15 p.m. My neighbor, Carrie, texted me first. "Annabelle, your parents just pulled up in an Uber. What is going on?" 3 minutes later, another text. "Your dad is violently kicking the front door. Your mom is screaming at the top of her lungs in the driveway. The neighbors are coming out. Are you okay?" I didn't reply. Then the voicemails started. First came my father, trying to sound controlled, but failing miserably. "Annabelle, there is a massive mistake. Our keys don't work and the house looks empty. Call me back right now before I lose my temper." 10 minutes later, my mother called, her voice completely dropped of its sweet act. "Annabelle, a neighbor just told us a moving truck was here yesterday. Where is our furniture? Where are my clothes? Answer the phone." Then came the final voicemail from my father. He was completely unhinged, screaming so loud the microphone distorted. "We found the note. You ungrateful, psycho little bitch. This is illegal. You stole our home. I am calling the police and we are suing you for every single penny you have. You will rot in jail for this." I listened to it once, felt a momentary flinch of the old guilt they built into me, and then I deleted it. The police never came because no crime was committed. My attorney sent a formal letter to their local legal representative with a certified copy of the original deed and a copy of the recorded phone call where they plotted to defraud me. The law firm dropped them instantly. My mother tried to launch a smear campaign, calling my Aunt Susan to claim I left them homeless. I simply forwarded Aunt Susan the audio recording of the pocket dial. There was a long silence on the line. "Annabelle," Sue said, "I am so sorry they treated you like that. I'm blocking their numbers. It's been a few months now. My parents ran through their remaining cash, staying at a cheap motel down the highway, and are currently renting a tiny 1-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. My father had to take a retail job just to cover their monthly expenses. They sent me a 4-page letter last week, begging me to let them move into my new apartment temporarily until they get back on their feet." There was no apology, just more emotional manipulation. My lawyer sent a 1-sentence reply on official letterhead. "Miss Croft does not offer housing accommodations. I lost my childhood home, and some days that weight sits incredibly heavy on my chest. But yesterday, the new owner sent me a photo of the backyard. The oak tree is still there, massive, strong, and deeply rooted. And for the first time in my entire life, looking at those roots, I know exactly what it feels like to be completely free."